And without further delay, I will present to you Baltimore Turnaround Tuesday.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melvin Wilson. I'm the co-director of Turnaround Tuesday. I'm going to have the current staff that we have in the room introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the agenda.
I'm Michelle Benjamin Jones, and I'm the case manager.
I'm Terrell Williams, the other co-director.
I'm Bree Johnson, the Director of Operations.
Hi, Cheryl Finney, strategist.
So first of all, again, we're very excited about this opportunity, not just for you guys, but for us as well, because it's a testament of the work that we're doing to change lives in Baltimore. To know that others are interested in doing this work in other parts of the country is very meaningful to us. We're very grateful to the team there that has followed Turnaround Tuesday over the last couple of years and to brought us to this point. So I just want to give you some brief history on how we got started and who our major stakeholders and players are, and then we'll turn it over to the rest of the team for some more information. So as we know, Turnaround Tuesday, when we first started, was a program of BUILD, Baltimore's United Leadership Development, which is the IAF entity here in Baltimore. In 2020, we had to separate and become our own 501c3, and the reason for that was the opportunity to raise additional funds that BUILD wasn't able to get because of the advocacy work that they do. So we are now an institution of turnarounds of BUILD, not a program. So we got started, actually, ironically, there's a church in Baltimore called Zion Baptist Church, which has been a BUILD institution for about 31 years now. When Pastor Marshall Prentice, who came to Baltimore from Pittsburgh, learned about BUILD and joined the BUILD organization. And we were fortunate at that time to have Terrell Williams, who was our co-director, as an organizer in that community. And Pastor and Terrell had many meetings at the church. And one day they were in the church office, which is next door to the actual physical church. It's in a house on the second floor. And they were sitting there talking. They actually stood up and they looked outside the window. And there were about 30 people literally hanging out on the street corner at about 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was a Tuesday. It probably wasn't.
It was a Tuesday.
It was a Tuesday. We're going to say it was a Tuesday. And BUILD at the time was developing houses in that community, bringing people in. The reality was that people that were hanging on these corners were not going to be able to live in these houses. So Terrell and Pastor Prentice, as good organizers, decided to go out on the street and ask the individuals, what would it take to get you off the street? And to a person, they said a livable wage job. What we learned is that many of these individuals had been through the criminal justice system and had applied for numerous jobs across many sectors and oftentimes weren't even afforded an interview because of their record. And we wanted to make a difference. So we brought everybody into the basement of Zion, had a house meeting. We began to have conversations on how we could help to get a job, help folks get a job. To be honest, we thought we were going to help a few people get jobs and then go on to our regular jobs. Most of us had other full-time jobs that we were participating in. But we really saw that this was a great need. We didn't have a lot of experience. We had zero money, but we wanted to make a difference. So we began to meet. We had our first meeting on a Tuesday, and that group of 50 quickly shrank to about 8 people. So we began to meet with these folks and really try to figure out what this was and to organize around how we could help get jobs. I had the pleasure of going to a meeting shortly after that with the president of Johns Hopkins at the time, a guy by the name of Ron Peterson. I was going into this meeting for Pastor Prentice, who had to do a homegoing service. And in that meeting, I was able to tell Mr. Peterson about Turnaround Tuesday. To be honest, again, we were very young, didn't have a lot going on, didn't really have structure. We were just learning and literally operating off the seat of our pants. In that meeting, after I told him about Turnaround Tuesday, Mr. Peterson asked me how many people did we have ready to go to work. The reality is I gave him a number that wasn't true. I told him we had 30 people ready to go to work and we only had 8 people in Turnaround Tuesday. Mr. Peterson at that point gave us 30 jobs. What he did more importantly is he connected us to Ron Daniels, who was the president of Johns Hopkins Hospital. And the two of them convened a breakfast of all the presidents and CEOs of all the hospitals and universities in Baltimore. And we were able to take 12 Turnaround Tuesday participants to this breakfast. If you know anything about the landscape of Baltimore, these were some of the most powerful people in this city. So these individuals were able to tell these presidents and CEOs how important the job not only meant to them, but to their families as well. We began to organize and began to build relationships. I can fast forward to today. Now we've now helped over 1,370 people get livable wage jobs, and mainly because of the relationships that we built. When we talk about stakeholders, we talk about several groups of people. One, our key stakeholders are our participants. Without them, we don't move forward. We always look at our participants as our biggest asset. Second, we will look at our employers. We need jobs. And what we've developed is an anchor institution strategy. Not only do we have the strength of Johns Hopkins, but we also have relationships with the University of Maryland, the MedStar hospitals, LifeBridge, which is another entity of hospitals. And then we have a bunch of employers that do manufacturing jobs and other jobs. So we have built a strong Rolodex of employers that are ready to employ people, particularly folks with records. Other stakeholders, most importantly to me, because one of my biggest responsibilities is to raise money, is foundations. In order to operate, we have to have money. When we first started Turnaround Tuesday, we were a staff of one, which was myself, and a budget of $52,000. We've now grown to a staff of 13 people with a budget exceeding $1.7 million. So it's important to be able to raise funds, but people have to believe in what it is that you're doing. And we've been able to do that through the results of the work that we've had. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, who's going to present what the Turnaround Tuesday looks like.
Thanks, Melvin. Good afternoon. So one thing we learned in the very beginning was that there had to be a 1 day a week, at least 50 weeks a year, a constant in people's life when they're in chaos and things are constantly changing. So Tuesdays became our cornerstone. And we literally only take, I think, 2 holidays, and the rest of the time we are always there. So people at the same time come from 9 to 11 on the east side of Baltimore, and on the west side, 1 to 3. And we're a constant where there isn't constants. So if you were to show up this Tuesday, you would walk down the basement to Zion Baptist Church. And when you arrived, you didn't have to register beforehand. You could have been invited by a friend or someone, and maybe one of our recruitment people out on the street saw you, and you just get to show up. When you arrive, you don't fill out any paperwork. You're greeted almost as if you're coming to a religious service or an AA meeting. It's a welcoming, what we call radical welcome, where you're just escorted to your seat, where there's an agenda, and you may fill out a form for COVID, for contact tracing, but that's it. You are welcomed. And who is welcomed and who are you sitting with? You might be sitting with an employer. You might be sitting with a support partner, one of our partnerships like child support or legal aid. You might be sitting next to someone who is not ready to work at all and might be high. You might be sitting with someone who's been there 8 weeks, someone who's come back that's already worked, and is coming back to share a story about what's going on the job, some conflict, or to sort of give back, reach back to others. So you're in a real mixed room. And how we begin is we read a higher purpose, so it centers people, and we get a volunteer to ask right off, how does that affect you? We have a rounds question, which if we have a small group, we'll do pair share, turning to your partner, and whoever you're sitting near, you stand up with someone you don't know and connect for a few minutes, and then 2 or 3 people will share up front. And it's a whole beginning of, you're going to be part of this, and you're welcomed as someone contributing from the beginning. You're not going to be sitting back. The next thing we do after rounds question is we move into spiritual vitamin. So we do a spirit, mind, and body piece. The spiritual vitamin could be religious. It could be a quote from a secular person, and it centers and grounds the work. It doesn't move into teaching. It gives people a moment, if they're carrying a lot when they walked into the space from that morning or that week, a moment to sort of just breathe, get centered, start to connect and relax. And then we move into what we call our role play. And our role play will center the work. It'll be on, like, for example, we're doing conflict resolution this week. And so we'll pull out something from the workplace that we've heard people have conflict with a supervisor, And we'll throw in some dimension of diversity in there, and our staff will role play it. And we really have a lot of fun with that. We get some laughter, we really connect with people, and then we unpack the role play, which begins the mind piece. And Terrell is the center of that. And the training will be anything from our 10-week training series. So it's an open curriculum. You can come in at any week and you can access it. It's not like sequential, because we'll just repeat the end of 10 weeks. And so you might get something on doing individual meetings, and you might fishbowl it and practice individually. You might get something on leadership, or look at characteristics of a leader, both in civic life or on the job. We'll look at public relationships versus private relationships. We take that in the workplace. We basically taken all the IF training and paired it with workforce training, created our own way of accessing that from both community organizing and on the job. We do something with dimensions of diversity, where we have the diversity wheel, and we look at, do you see change differences in people as a multiplier or a divider? And what might be a trigger for you? And if you can catch it the second time you get triggered, maybe you can do something different. And we bring up all kinds of things that we've heard about on the job from our employed people who give back to us and say, this is what's really going on at Hopkins right now with my supervisor. And so we use real world examples all the time. And I covered the topics, I guess, most of the topics. So then we'll move from the mind piece to a breakout session. Really important for people that are shy and not able to talk in large groups to have that space where they can be in a small group of 8 to 10 people. Well, at that moment, we'll move anyone who's new into the orientation breakout, and our case manager and others will speak with them about their process and give a history of Turnaround Tuesday and what they're a part of. For everyone else who's been there from weeks 2 through, could be a couple of months, we break into 3 or 4 small groups, and we have leaders ready to facilitate it. And we work on case scenarios. Every single week we come up with something on the job or something in your life. What would you do in this situation? And you practice having people use their voice, like if you're working on a team. So it really is training how to be in a group setting, but also on the actual topic. Then we come back and everyone reports out. It gives somebody new who's never had a microphone standing up at the front of the room. Each breakout reports out, and that can be challenging sometimes to try to keep it contained, but we've gotten pretty good at that piece, including the newest person from orientation. And then we close with something for the body. Our pastor and some staff members put on a little music, and we do a little aerobics and get a lot of laughter. And so, kind of a fun moment. And so the spirit, mind, body is all addressed. It's closed with a big circle, prayer, announcements, what your next steps are, who you should connect with. And then the last thing is, if you are ready to move on, and as the others will tell you about the process, you'll move on to our 30-hour essential skills class. And that's like every couple weeks, we do a 2 to 3 week run of where a small cohort of 10 to 15 people will sit together and for 30 hours learn those same topics. We unpack in a much deeper way, where we journal with a rounds question when they come in, they start to stand up and present in front of the room. We role play all the time, and we get to sit in that again, that same training. And to learn, you really have to be able to have repeats and a chance to do it in a small group. Want to lay down enough?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
Michelle,
Awesome.
I mean,
I'm next.
You're next.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how here at Turnaround Tuesday, we pride ourselves in seeing people. So by the time a person completes their process, we see people beyond what they're saying. And there is a process. I believe there's 8 to 9 steps in our process. And there's a couple of things that comes out of this process for a person. One, you build community with the staff members that you get to meet, because you get to meet each staff member and not just be assigned to a case manager and check in once or twice a month, and that ends your process. But you truly have the ability to build relationships with all of the staff. And as a staff, we kind of all learn how we have to see people in our various roles. And Michelle's going to talk about case management, but once you come to orientation, as Cheryl mentioned, on a Tuesday, you will be assigned to a case manager within 24 to 48 hours. The case manager will do an assessment, and Michelle will talk about that, but once the assessment is done, she'll assign you and you'll have an individual meeting. And the individual meeting will be with a staff member or one of our coaches. And then you'll quickly move into meeting with a job developer or the jobs team. And we'll talk and ask about what are your areas of interest? What have you done before? What is it that you're doing now? And what is it that you look forward to doing? After job development, again, they'll get assigned, as Cheryl mentioned, essential skills training. And it is something that is mandatory. And essential skills training is the 30 hours of training. And once that's done, there is a download about a person, and then we go straight into job placement after essential skills. And once you start your job placement and you get your job, you meet with retention. Retention is also a very important piece to what it is that we do, because life happens once you start the job too. So retention steps in almost immediately when you get the job offer to see if you're completely aware of the location, transportation, your job requirements, your hours, so on and so forth. But it's that additional support that you have once you get the job. So we definitely have a process that we put in place, and we teach people that you must own your process. And when you own your process, you can go as quick or as slow as needed. So yeah, so I'll have Michelle from case management talk about the process of case management.
Hi, everyone. So as the case manager, as Bree mentioned, my primary job is an assessment piece. And it's one of the most important pieces of the puzzle because we really get to identify the things that are maybe standing in an individual's way. So what we call them here are barriers. So different things come up for different people. And sometimes they're not even aware that this is a barrier to their success or to them moving forward. One of the things that we do in the assessment piece is identify what those barriers are and kind of give them different levels of how they're going to move forward. So we have 3 different levels that we're operating under right now, and those levels just speak to the levels of the barriers. So for example, someone on the level 1 would have minimal barriers, something like maybe transportation, living a little far from the bus line, or something around, a license issue. I lost my license, I need to get a new license. That's something that's relatively simple to fix and is able to be moved forward pretty quickly. A level 2 person or someone with level 2 barriers is maybe someone who has stronger barriers. Things like maybe housing is unstable, a little bit of childcare issues. I've had my child in this daycare, I might move them to this daycare, or I don't have the funds to have alternate daycare sources, etc. And those are a little bit more difficult barriers to maneuver, but we are still able to help them move forward with those barriers. And usually someone who is a 2 has some things they need to work on, and they can work on them relatively quickly or work on them while they're in the process. So by the time it gets to job placement or employment, those barriers are no longer as pressing. And finally, we have our people who are level 3s, and those people are generally individuals who may not be able to obtain the standardized setting of work. So they may need supported employment, or they may need other avenues that need to be they may need more support in work. So individuals with intellectual disabilities, individuals with long-term mental health issues or non-compliant with medication for mental health concerns. Also individuals who are on disability or who can only work part-time. Sometimes they fall in that level 3 category because the type of employment they need is so specific that it's something that cannot be maneuvered easily. So we have a lot of different areas where individuals can fall. And when I say that we always support people where they are. So if we meet someone who has something that is considered to be a very serious barrier, we will work with them and work with them and work with them. And we have many examples of individuals who just continue to come because we've provided that sense of community for them. And it's not even at that point about obtaining employment, but maybe volunteering somewhere or learning all the skills that they need to be better volunteers in the positions that they're currently in. So that's really the case management piece. However, I do want to say it's completely different than any other type of case management I've ever done in the past. And by saying that, I mean that these individuals really come to us with all of their pieces. We look at the whole entire person. So just because this job may meet these requirements and you may not meet those requirements doesn't cancel you out for these positions. We really, really work with people who can do a variety of things, and we see their potential even before sometimes they see it. Is there anything about the case management piece that I'm forgetting? That's pretty much all. Thank you.
And so next is retention. And this, we have Dramika Carroll, we call her JC, has joined us.
Hello. Do you just want me to speak in that? Oh, thank you. Hello, again, I am JC. I am the retention specialist. So I can just go into a little bit about what retention does. So when we are notified by our job development team about someone who will be starting work and or by our participant who will be starting work soon, our retention department, me and Chantel, will reach out to our participants and make sure that they know how to get there. They mapped it out. If they don't have way to print it out, I'll also print it and if see if texting the address to make sure they get there. If they have money to actually get there, if their new job requires uniform and or business attire, we have a clothing closet here at Turnaround Tuesday, to where I will get their sizes and information for men and or women to make sure they at least have a week's worth of clothing to start. And we'll also do our 7-day check-in to just see how the work is coming along, if you need any additional support to maintain until you receive your first paycheck with starting your new job. Because just because you start working, that does not mean any barriers and or your life just changes automatically. So we also follow them up for 30 days. Then we do our 60 days and our 90 days, so forth and so forth, where we follow them up to 2 years. And again, throughout that time, we're seeing if they did any life changes, bought a house, needed to open up a bank account, if they bought a car, if they wanted to go up, if they're going up for a promotion, or if any conflict on a job that came about where they need us to help with some conflict resolution, redirecting them back to the HR for any services that they need. And like I said, if they want to do maybe go about switching to another position within the same institution, we'll go through the process of seeing when they are off and meeting them, so that way we can go and update their resume if they need assistance and show them how to apply and give them interview prep for a new position with the same employer and or maybe with another employer. But we make sure that we don't lose them in their process, that if they do want a career change or just change something, that they stay working, and we can also switch them into something else. We don't never want them to not be to not have a job. In any event that does happen, we are still here and we are coaching them through the process to let them know, of what happened and how we can fix it, so that way this won't happen again with the next employer. And like I said, we follow them for 2 years and stay in contact with them.
So you've heard a lot about our process. I want to say that we don't believe this works without broad-based organizing. I mean, relationships are absolutely a necessity. And we're talking about relationships with employers, relationships with direct service providers, relationships with public officials. Many times we have to use the power of build to get to those rooms that are necessary. What we found is, in many cases, most of our people, they've gone to workforce development programs. They have certificates, have all kinds of things, but they've never gotten an interview in many cases. And our research showed that in order for us to really make a change, we had to go to the top. We had to go to the owners. We had to go to the CEOs, because what we found was things would get lost at the hiring manager level. So 1, we had to have a relationship with the CEOs. 2, we understood that we were dealing, 60% of our people have criminal records. And we know the major problem happens with the background check. And so we had to create relationships with that person who's checking the background. And there are many cases where we have had people that did not get the job after finally getting the interview, because our commitment, the commitment we wanted from employers is, if a person would get an interview based on their talent, skills, and abilities without the record, interview them. Because we know with the work that we've done with them, if they get the interview, they're going to get the job. But what we found was in that background check was a problem, and we had to relate to the person who was responsible for that. And so at each of those institutions, what we have is a process whereby if there are questions, let's say that they have this person, the department likes the person, they want to hire the person, and the only person who knows that that person has a record is the background checker. And so the background checker will send something to us to say, look, this person, I don't know if we can get this person through. Can you write a letter of support for this person, right? And so we would write a letter of support. And I can say that over 95, 99% of the people, when we write that letter explaining what was going on in the life of that person when they did this thing, they get through and they get the job. So the relationship with the employers is absolutely vital. And you must start at the top. The relationship with the direct service providers are vital, because what we found out about our people is they've gone for support everywhere. And the way they're treated when they get there, in many cases, put them in even worse state. And so we don't work with organizations that we don't know. When we send someone to a mental health facility, we don't send them to the facility, we send them to a person at the facility. Because if they come back and say they did not have a good visit, we're going to call that person because we have a relationship with them. Our idea is almost like the doctor's credo. It is do no further harm. Because what we realize is many of our people have been harmed tremendously. So relationships are absolutely vital. And when there's trouble getting that relationship with the CEO or the president, Bill steps in. And we use the power of our organization to get that meeting. And there are many, many examples where that has happened. And once we finish, we like to tell our Care First story. And many of us was a part of that. It was out of the Freddie Gray incident that happened, and the city had to do something. And so Johns Hopkins, the president of Johns Hopkins, came to us and said to us, can you help us with this? And we'll talk about that later. But the second thing is this element of power. Turnaround Tuesday is not powerful because it's Turnaround Tuesday. Turnaround Tuesday is powerful because it's a part of Build, right? People know there's a cost for not dealing with us. There's a cost for Under Armour for doing the development and not including Turnaround Tuesday. If for some reason something happens, we can have our co-chairs to step in. That is on the Build side. So this idea about making change, we know does not happen without the element of power. So relationships and power. And the last thing I like to say is the 10 to 15% of the people who come to Turnaround Tuesday want to rebuild their community and do something more. And so that is another way in which Build or the IAF is very supportive for us. They are organizing our team. We have a team of probably 150 community health workers that we have trained across this city. And now we're figuring out, how do we use that power? How do we use the power of 150 people in community doing work across the city that we help to develop? And so one of the things that Bill is looking at is, how do we organize this group? And what do we organize them to do? Because we know the biggest change for us is around systems. It's not, this is the short-term strategy for Turnaround Tuesday, is to help get people living wage jobs. The long-term strategy is to change the way employers see people. Because we understand that in many cases, employers do more harm than good to people who are already hurt. And so we continue to, and that is why we stay with people for 2 years, because we understand going into an institution doesn't solve the problems in a person's home. They still need an institution. They still need people to help them navigate this thing called life. And we want to be the institution that people do not have. We have noticed that people live very isolated lives. And we say to those CEOs and those presidents that this is not charity. This is about responsibility. This is about being a leader in the community. You can't take the cream off the top and leave everybody else to suffer. And so we say to them that you have a direct responsibility, especially in the anchor institutions, to help to support the community where you are the anchor. And we help them understand that we're not coming asking for favors. We're talking about responsibility. And you should be responsive to people that you take the bullet out of. You can take the bullet out of their bodies, but you can't hire them to mop the floor or to do whatever those other things that are inside of that institution. So it's all about making sure that our relationship and the people we deal with are accountable to what they say they're going to do, and how can we make sure that we hold them accountable. The last thing that I want to mention, or I would love for Melvin to mention, is this next step that we have just been honored with this new grant that we don't know what it means for us, but it's an absolute major opportunity for Turnaround Tuesday.
So before I do that, I just want to follow up and circle back to a time with something Terrell said as well. We also have been really fortunate to have a very strong board of directors.
Yes.
When we talked about Ron Peterson, who was the president of Hopkins, he actually serves as the co-chair of our board of directors with Pastor Prentice, who again was part of the initial meeting with Terrell outdoors. So that's very important. We currently have the president of Hopkins now serves on our board of directors. And recently, the president of the University of Maryland rotated off of our board. So when we talk about, meeting folks at the top, when you have that pushed down through the organization, these folks serve on the board, it really has benefited us as we continue to build these relationships. And the last thing, as Terrell said, that we've been really blessed with recently, there's a national foundation who really looks at investing in people coming out of prison and poverty. And they sought us out. You can't apply for this grant. This is something they seek you out. Because of a relationship we had here locally, and someone went to go work for that organization, they reached out to us. And this organization makes substantial investments into an organization to scale the work that you're doing. And this scale is in the levels of millions of dollars. We actually, and I'm very shy of sharing some of this information, but we're going to start off with a planning grant of $500,000 just for the planning grant. And this is again, in a year or so, they will invest millions of dollars into our work to scale it. We're not sure what scale completely means yet. We're going to have follow-up conversations with the foundation, but one, scale locally, scale statewide, and possibly scale this work outside of the state of Maryland. So we're excited about this opportunity. It's the hard work of the team collectively, and I can tell you when we got the information, we were sitting like we are now, and you're talking about 4 crybabies. It was just an emotional moment for us, and it really signified to us that the work that we're doing is important and meaningful, and we're blessed to be in this space. So thank you.
So I asked Melvin to share that because we really bought into this idea that this work really is about relationships. We would not be in that situation if not for relationships. And Bill taught us how to create relationships at all levels. So I say to you, if you're going to take a step toward Turnaround Tuesday, you've got to look at your relationships, and you've got to leverage those relationships, not only with anchors and funders, but those direct service providers that, we can't help every person who comes here, right? They have various needs. And so once we find out there's a need that one has, we find the organization, and inside the organization, we find the person. And it is vital that you understand. I believe, I even said, well, we've said several times that maybe we should look at a learning or teaching institute because of the way in which we see our participants and the way we do the work. It is not the traditional workforce development operation. It is vital, I believe, that people understand that in many cases, the people we serve has never truly been served as valuable people. And it is our job to help them see in themselves and see the power that they have in themselves so they can go on with their life. So that group of people you put together to service people is vital. If you ask me what's the most important thing, I say the people that you put in front of your participants. It is vital that they understand how to deal with people who have already been traumatized over and over again.